Hey, Sam, I wanted to check in with you on our baby. The social media training for elected officials is a project we've been putting together. What kind of feedback are you getting from the city managers in the community?
The biggest pain point is actually the elected officials and how they're responding to social media versus, maybe even the keyboard warriors themselves. Like the elected officials desperately need to understand how to take this stuff in context.
That's the brilliance of your training is showing the elected officials how they can control their response and how that can have a positive or negative impact on the organization based on that response.
100%. One other learning I have that I want to share is I've had a few city managers ask, well, can I preview the training? Can I come to the training before I send my elected officials? Because, some of you don't know me and may not trust me. Totally fine, right? So it's only $99 if you sign up through civysocial.com/AAME, Joe's special link, and you can come check it out. And you're like, oh, yep, this is exactly what my electeds need. Then you can send them off and get them reprogrammed and take that pain point, make it go away.
If you're a city manager who has some social media keyboard warriors who are driving you insane and making you pull your hair out because your council is responding to it in such a negative way, you need to check out this new course by Sam Tolles at Civi Social. All right. I'm Joe Turner, and this is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. It is the most influential local government podcast in America. And with me today is Michael Stahl of the Mental Hygiene Project. And Michael, we've been trying to do this podcast now for almost 2 years. In fact, I went back, looked at my notes. I think the first time you or your partner, Ryan Gallik, who's not on the call today, contacted me was back in January of 2024. And here we are running into November of 2025. So welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's great to be on the program, and it's great to really be able to connect after all that time.
Yeah, at this might call this the persistence project, right, or something like that, as opposed to the mental hygiene project, because
Yeah,
you guys have
no
been
kidding.
consistent in reaching out to me and talking about these issues. And I thought we've actually recorded an episode in the past, but we didn't really like how it turned out, so we scrapped it. And trying to get the schedule together, we were going to have your partner Ryan Gallik on the show, and so we tried to get 3 people together at one time for a podcast. It's been a journey. It's been a journey, but I'm glad we're here today.
Yeah, me too. And I really look forward to a great discussion and giving your listeners some value and things that they can walk away with some good nuggets.
Yeah, and you and we have had great conversations along with Ryan, and I've been very candid with you guys. And I think one of the reasons why it's taken us a while to get to this point is I've always just sort of had a little bit of a sketchy sort of viewpoint of, I don't know, the mental health space, right? I think there's a lot of fluff. I think there's a lot of talk, and I'm not sure how much of it's really coming from a place of expertise and legitimacy versus, say, the schlocky, feel good mental health stuff that we hear oftentimes in the marketplace. So I've been a little bit sketchy about wanting to do mental health themed podcast episodes in the past. I did have one or two. And then the other area is on leadership in general, which is another area that I feel gets a little bit kind of like, used car salesman meets mega church pastor type thing, when it comes to leadership. So I want to be really candid with you and the audience. I've been a little bit hesitant to go down this road of content, but I've had a tough year. I've had a really tough year, and as you know, I'm facing 2 felony charges down in Florida, and it's been quite a journey for me. And frankly, I've had my ass kicked this year. And so when you reached out to me again, I was like, you know what, Michael, Ryan, let's do it. I need to check in with you guys, and we'll have a conversation about mental health because I've been beat down pretty good this year. So before we get into the episode, why don't you do a quick introduction about who you are, what the Mental Hygiene Project is all about, and also maybe briefly give us a background on your partner, Ryan Gallik, who's not in the call.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I really just appreciate the time, Joe, and looking forward to having a conversation that's meaningful because, to your point, what we don't want to do is create a situation where it seems schlocky or not of value. And Ryan and I really pride ourselves on having scientifically validated programs. Everything that we do is peer reviewed. And so, myself, Michael Stahl, and my business partner, Ryan Gallik, we are managing partners of the Mental Hygiene Project. And essentially, what we do is work with leaders and organizations to create cultures of high performance through improving leadership effectiveness and really creating what we call proactive resilience. And I want to make clear to your listeners, Ryan and I are not clinicians ourselves, although we do work with psychiatrists, psychologists, behavioral scientists. And so everything that we do is based in science. And the interesting thing is, the world itself is becoming turbulent faster than organizations are able to become resilient.
Right.
And so, what we do is really more relevant and actually more practical than ever before for businesses because everything that we do has a positive human and financial impact. The idea is we want to be able to affect people in a way that creates more engagement, more inspiration at work, and also help organizations, municipalities. We work in both the public sector and the private sector. And we want to help organizations really achieve what we call inspired performance. And that means that people are coming to work not because they feel that they have to, but because they want to.
Right.
And we want to help organizations create people who are committed as opposed to just compliant. And so we do that in, again, a variety of different ways. But the two main focuses of our work for many years has been how do we create better leadership effectiveness starting on the individual level with leaders? And then how do we create an organization that is more resilient, both from the individual level as well as from the organizational level? In other words, how do we create strategic resilience when things happen in the marketplace, in the economy that are challenging? How do we help people deal with that? And some of the tools that we have, one of the things we'll talk about today, the Harrison assessment in particular, is certainly clinical in nature. And just really looking forward to diving into that discussion.
Yeah. For the audience, they should understand that a couple months ago, I actually sat down with Michael and Ryan and took the Harrison assessment. Actually, the Harrison assessment itself, a test, an examination, was something I did on my own virtually through the online interface. But I sat down with both of you gentlemen to essentially go over the results of that assessment. And it was really fascinating. It was really fascinating because it was for those who have never taken it, and I've never been one of those guys. Like, everyone, the other thing, Michael, is like everyone talks about, I'm INTJ or something, or
Sure.
I just always sort of look side eyed at that kind of stuff, and I think there's some value there to it, but like I said, I just feel like there's a lot of hocus pocus sometimes in those conversations. But I went through this Harrison assessment with you, and it was roughly an 18 question examination or whatnot. And if you have never taken it before, essentially you get something like 7 or 8 sentences that describe your personality, or you got to rank them on what's most representative of your personality versus least representative, or whatnot. And you go through this round robin of 18 questions, and it dials in with your answers to give you a pretty comprehensive assessment of who you are as a leader, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what you can improve on, essentially, right? Is that a fair representation, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Joe, you bring up a really interesting and valid point, and I want to make this clear for your listeners. You mentioned like the Myers-Briggs, ENFTJ, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Another very famous personality profile is called the DISC. We're actually master trainers on the DISC. So believe me, personality profiles in general do have their place. Here's the fundamental distinction between a core personality profile and the Harrison assessment. Everybody who's ever born, even as an infant, will gravitate towards a specific personality. Now, as you grow up, as you get into your teenage years, your adult years, you can learn about your personality. You can learn about other people's personality. And what you can't do is change your personality. And the difference with the Harrison is that although personality is a very small part of it, it looks at things like work preferences and environmental preferences and task preferences and cultural preferences. And when you look at behavioral traits, which is really what it defines, every person in the world, no matter where you come from, no matter where you grew up, no matter what country you're from, every person in the world can change their behavior to yield a different or a more desirable result if they want to. Now, obviously, you have to want to, but
So
the idea is,
let me step on here. So you're saying
yeah,
we can't change our personality, but we can change our behavior in recognition of our personality traits. Am I following you on that?
we can change our behavior in recognition of either balance or imbalance in 12 core paradoxes.
Okay.
So, if your listeners have ever heard of the kind of Far Eastern methodology of the yin and the yang, if you will,
Uh-huh. Right.
this is kind of what this looks at. I'll give you an example. Let me just give you a quick example for your listeners and make more sense. So, if you were to take something like communication, the greatest communicators in the world are both frank and diplomatic at the same time. That creates what we call a forthright diplomat. Now, here's the caveat to that. Ryan and I work with a lot of leaders in many organizations, and we have a lot of experience in doing that. And I'll tell you what we found. Sometimes we'll work with people who communicate with incredibly high frankness and very low levels of diplomacy. So they end up coming across as blunt. And it's almost humorous because when Ryan and I will point this out, in some cases, people will say, leaders, I mean, hey, listen, I'm telling people the truth. All I'm doing is telling people the truth. And if they can't handle it, that's their problem, not mine. Well, the idea is you may be telling people the truth. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the way in which we communicate. So I would ask you, Joe, let me just ask you this.
Well, Ryan, Michael, Michael, I got to tell you, my wife says this all the time. Honey, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And then she always
Absolutely.
chides me on that. Yeah.
Let me ask you a quick question, Joe.
Sure.
If you were to meet somebody, you never met this person before in your life, you don't know who they are, they don't know who you are, for whatever reason, this person just comes up to you and they push you hard. I mean, like physically, I'm talking about physically pushing you. What would the natural reaction be to that?
My natural reaction would be a violent reaction.
Anybody's reaction is
Yeah.
going to be to push back. That's not just specific to you.
Uh-huh.
That is human nature. If people feel pushed, they're going to push back. So here's my point. When people communicate in a blunt way, the receivers of the message
are going to push back.
Well, because they feel like they're being pushed.
Right.
And
I got
so
you.
that destroys the integrity of the message. So you say, well, what's the solution to that? That's just who I am. The leaders will say, that's just who I am. That's just how I've communicated my whole life. This is a behavioral choice, though. Now, the idea is not to be less frank because frankness is good.
Right.
You don't want people to be less frank. Frankness is a positive thing. The idea is to raise your level of diplomacy. Work on raising your level of tact. Now, listen, does that happen overnight? Do you snap your fingers and just all of a sudden wake up the next day and have
You're
perfect
Mr. Diplomat?
balance?
Yeah. That's not going to happen.
I would say no. Ryan and I, like I say, we work with a lot of folks and we do a lot of coaching and we've never experienced that. The good news is, though, and there's always good news, if people choose to work on raising their tact and raising their diplomacy over time, you get better balance. And then you can become a forthright diplomat. And everything we do, Joe, and I'm so glad that you opened this podcast up by saying, hey, I've thought about this stuff. I don't know if it's got hard results or if it's too soft. No, everything we do is based on business results. Because when you can communicate as a forthright diplomat, we're going to create better engagement. City managers are going to be able to get more productivity. People are going to feel inspired. It releases creativity instead of suppressing it. But let me say one more thing on that, Joe. And this is very important for your listeners to understand, because when you talk about those 12 different paradoxes within what we call, Ryan and I call it the psychological ecosystem.
Okay.
And we took communication. Remember, there's the yang to the yin, because we also work with leaders who are very high on their diplomatic score, like a 10 on diplomacy,
Right.
but they're a 2 on frankness. And the reason why is because they're so hypersensitive to not offending people that they never actually share what they really think. They're evasive. So people have a meeting with a leader like that, and they'll walk away going, do you know what that guy said? I mean, do you
Right.
know what she said? Do you know where her stance is? No, I don't know. I have no idea. And that is also uh, equally negative in terms of results. So, in that person's case, we would not seek to lower their diplomacy because diplomacy is good. We would want to help them raise their level of frankness. And again, this is over time.
Right, right, right. And Michael, we talked about this before when we did my assessment with you guys.
Yes,
Is that you are never trying to when you talk about yin and the yang? I think a lot of people think of like this pendulum or this continuum, or trying to find balance per se, right? And you're trying to find balance not by reducing someone's score in a category. You're simply trying to elevate their score on the other side of the equation. Correct? Am I my correct interpretation on that? Meaning, no one's trying to make you less diplomatic. No one's trying to make you less direct. It's trying to make it so that the other side balances out, and you're basically at peak performance on both equations. Correct?
absolutely. 100% on point. And I appreciate you bringing that up because, Ryan and I have studied assessments for many years. Personally, I've studied assessments for about 25 years now at this point. And a vast majority of assessments in the world are what you call bipolar in nature. And I don't mean to get too clinical when I say that. I'm not talking about the mental health condition. That's not what I'm referring to. When I say bipolar, I'm talking about it's A, B, C, or D. Boom, you've got to pick. Well, the Harrison doesn't do that. The Harrison looks at those groupings like you were talking about before, because it's trying to define what do you like most to what do you like least, and that influences behavior. So to your point, and you're right, by the way, it's not about lowering a trait, it's about raising both traits to be balanced to get the best possible reaction, the best possible success, productivity, communication, engagement, all of those things.
Yeah, and so like we said at the outset of this interview that we're going to talk about two sort of projects or products that you guys have with the Mental Hygiene Project, and that is one, what we're talking about now is this Harrison assessment, and two, we're going to talk about this more of this organizational staff wide psychological empowerment 360, which is like a mental health component to the entire organization. So again, we're talking now about the leadership, and then we're going to talk in a few minutes, about the mental health aspect of it. But I want to get dialed in on the leadership component here, because, like I said, I went through the assessment, the Harrison assessment. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really illuminating, and especially the debrief. And I want to communicate a couple things. One is, you don't just give them the assessment, give them an hour to review it, on an online Zoom call, and then wipe your hands and say we're all done. Right? Your idea, what your organization does, is you help them assess those leadership abilities, and then you give them the tools to improve in the areas that you want to see improvement, to find that balance. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Part of the element or the overall deliverables that we have is coaching. And the idea with coaching is that sometimes people will ask us, hey, what's different about what you do?
Right.
Well, there's a number of things that are different. And when it comes to coaching, this is one of them. And here's what I mean by that. A lot of times firms will come in and maybe they do just a very cursory type assessment, but it's not customized, it's not individualized to the person. And Ryan and I know that leaders are busy. People, they're so busy, we don't want to waste 1 second of their time. So when we come in and we do the Harrison, we know exactly where the strengths are. So, in other words, if somebody's already a forthright diplomat, we're not going to waste their time doing coaching in an arena where they've already reached what we call resolution. They're already there. We're going to focus on opportunities for development for the individual that is going to make the biggest positive impact on their performance and thus the performance of the entire organization. And the reason we can do that is because of the fact that we have this clinical tool.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to share with the audience. It's very difficult for me sometimes when I have this podcast, Michael, because a lot of folks, a lot of vendors, and I don't mean that as a pejorative, but a lot of folks would like to come on the podcast and have access to my audience. And like we said at the beginning, this has been a 2-year process for you and I to have this interview here today, right? And I'm very deliberate about the type of conversations I have with vendors, or if I'm receiving compensation. You've not paid me to be on this program. We've talked about possibly entering into an affiliate deal for full disclosure, but we don't have anything signed in writing. And so I'm not getting anything for this episode. And I want to make sure that's clear. But the other thing I want to communicate is that's very important for me to, when I go to my peers, my colleagues, I want to be able to sign off on it and have my buy-in, right? As far as like, this is why I really believe in what they're doing, or I've had a really good experience, and so I can tell you that when I went through the Harrison assessment, I was a little bit kind of jaded at the outset, and then we went through it. And even still, I will tell you this. I never told you this in our first interview that we scrapped, Michael, but when I'm going through these questions, I'm like, what the hell? 18 questions of this round robin style stuff. And it's like, okay, what's this really going to tell me, right? How's it? Because the 18 questions, they give you 8 options or whatever it is. But for the audience, when you take it, these options sort of just move around. So I think there's a few more than 8 total, but you're basically in a small universe of options for all 18 questions, and you're just ranking and prioritizing. It's just going through this whole process. And it's like, I just rolled my eyes a little bit during the assessment. And then when I jumped onto the call with you and Ryan, it was really illuminating, because I was like, oh, wow, that does make sense. I am that person, or yeah, I do have some weakness in that area. And it really does get dialed in. And I say all that, Michael, because we're going to talk a minute about the mental health aspect for the organization, and I can't speak to that in as an individual or as a city manager. I've never worked with you in that environment, but what I think is really great about what the Harrison assessment does and allows, and why we're starting the conversation with this, is I think that for the city managers out there who are listening, they could say, hey, I wouldn't mind going through that assessment with Michael and Ryan and seeing how that goes. And then you take baby steps, right? If you like what you see as far as the test, and you like the feedback that you're getting, you find that illuminating, then you say, okay, well, you know what I want to do? I want to broaden this Harrison assessment out now to all my senior staff, right? Maybe my ACMs, my DCMs. I want to get my department heads on there. We're going to run them through that Harrison assessment, because the great thing about the Harrison assessment, Michael, is I know you'll preach this, is that not only does it help you learn about yourself, but the magic really is helping you better understand your staff, right? Your senior staff and your executive team, so that you guys can work together better and communicate more effectively. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, Joe, that we add into the Harrison package or offering, if you will, is the fact that once specific teams go through it, so say, for example, you've got 10 senior leaders or 15, whatever the number is, then we can take all of that individual data and put those into what we call scatter graphs. And what I mean by that is that, let's again just pick a number. Let's say there's 15 leaders. Again, could be more, could be less, but we're going to use that number. It's a round number. And you would take those 15 people and do a scatter graph for every single one of the 12 paradoxes. And then Ryan and I will come in and explain to the team, hey, as a team, here's where you gravitate. As a team, maybe you're more self sacrificing, or as a team, maybe you're more dominant, or as a team, maybe you tend to be less collaborative. And we really define it within each specific area. And when we do that, I have to say, it's remarkable in terms of how people respond, because the idea behind that is they look at that, and they've already at this point gone through their individual session, and they look at that and they are like, wow, I kind of thought that might be the case, but I never really saw it in a clinical way. And so it provides a roadmap, if you will,
Right.
for people to
Right.
understand how to move forward, how to get better, and really maximize success.
And I think it can also help you identify maybe some of those blind spots, right? Or maybe I could, like when I did my individual assessment, I can say, oh yeah, I kind of recognize that I was maybe a little bit, deficient in this area that I need to improve on. But if you can also take it for your entire executive staff or senior leadership, and by the way, this could be organization wide. You can even just do it in your, your public safety departments or your public works departments. It doesn't need
Of
to be.
course,
I mean,
of course.
obviously, if I guess what I'm getting at is if you're a city manager or department head, you can take baby steps into this process. But I also think it helps you expose some of those blinders that you might have as an organization, which you can really then peel back the onion and say, wait, we might have a lot of other individuals in this department or in this organization that don't respond well to us as a team because we are hyper concentrated in this area or wherever the case might be. And I think that can also have it could be a great reveal for you as a leader of an organization or you as a department that, hey, maybe we are overlooking or snuffing out the contributions of these other individuals because we are so overweighted in this category, and these individuals who are going to be, say, have this type of personality over here are not going to feel comfortable engaging or responding or participating in the ways that we think they should. You get what I'm getting at?
Oh, definitely. And these are kinds of things, to your point, that you can see very clearly when you do the scatter graphs, because you see how people are interacting with one another, or in some cases, not interacting with one another.
Right.
And you also see
Or they're
specifically,
literally kind of repelled by each other, right? Because they just have a natural.
absolutely,
I mean, that's the reality, right? These personalities are repelling each other.
undoubtedly.
Yeah.
I mean, an example of that would be somebody working with. We'll do another area real quick for your listeners, just for the benefit of your listeners for understanding. There's another area called equity mindset, or power for short, we kind of call it. Looks at two different behavioral traits. One is called assertive, the degree to which you make known your own wants and your own needs. And the other trait is called helpfulness, the degree to which you help other people attain their wants and their needs. And when we work with teams, we often find that there are imbalances either way. In other words, if a person is high on assertive and low on helpfulness, they're going to come across as very dominant. Hey, it's
Right.
all about me. Every decision that I make as a leader is going to be about if it's good for me and I don't care about the team. Conversely to that, on the flip side, if a person is high on helpfulness and low on assertive, they're going to be what we call self sacrificing.
Yeah. They're gonna
They'll
walk all
have what
over, right? Yep.
yeah, they will have what we call, or they'll have what we call the martyr syndrome. They're giving and giving until it bleeds. They're putting everybody else's needs before their own. And ultimately, that leads to burnout. And so, the idea, to your point, Joe, getting back to your original line of thinking here, if you have a certain contingent of people on the team who gravitate towards being dominant, and another contingent of people on the team who gravitate towards being self sacrificing, that in and of itself creates difficulty in terms of them being able to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There was a story that you and Ryan shared with me on the first version of this podcast that we scrapped. And I don't know if you feel like you can take a few minutes to kind of go down the story, but it was in the private sector. If I recall something, it was like an individual who was getting ready to go on a conference and leave the organization for a week or something. And I guess while he was away or something like that, staff basically mutiny and say, hey, if this guy comes back and when things don't change in the near future, we're gone. We're out of here. Something like that, right? Can you walk us through that story real quick? Because I thought that was really illuminating.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it's kind of humorous in a number of different ways and on a number of different levels, because you shared, and I appreciate your honesty in terms of, hey, I was a little bit skeptical about this at first. And a lot of people are. This particular gentleman that you're referring to was on another level of skepticism. So here's what happened. This was several years ago. And we'd been working with a West Coast client in the private sector. And really, we'd actually worked with this client on a consulting basis for about 2 years at that point. So we really had trained the senior level managers, upper level executives, had not had an opportunity to meet this one person yet. He was relatively new to the organization. So I was in my office in Orlando, get a frantic call from the VP of HR. I mean, she's hyperventilating on the phone. literally hyperventilating. I can't do it. Michael, I can't believe it. This is horrendous. This is terrible. I said, okay, all right, Richard. Okay, first of all, I hear you. I'm here to support you. What happened? Let's start with what happened.
Right.
So she goes, well, our VP of the NOC, which stands for Network Operations Center, this was a technology company in the private sector. That's kind of the beehive of the company. She says, our VP of the NOC just left to go to New York on a business trip. I said, yeah, okay. She says, well, the guy no sooner walked out the door than we had every single person from his department walk into HR and tell me personally that they had their resumes out and they were leaving the company because he was the worst manager, the worst leader they'd ever had. She said,
Wow.
Michael, do you understand how expensive that would be to recruit and to hire and to train a new department? She says, we couldn't even do it because all of the operations would go down. She's just like, this is a catastrophe. I said, okay, all right, well, let's just ask a few questions here. First of all, what about this guy? Now, I've never met him yet. Is he really the right person for your culture? I mean, you really think this guy is a fit?
Yeah, maybe you gotta get rid of that guy, right?
Right. That's where I was going.
Yeah.
And she says, we can't get rid of him. I said, well, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. She says, well, this guy, you have no idea. He is a technical genius of the highest caliber. So he basically is totally necessary for everything that we do from a tech standpoint. He's just the worst leader.
Mission critical. There you go.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, first of all, we're going to have him take the Harrison assessment. And we're going to engage in a 2-month intensive executive leadership coaching program. And we're going to get this fixed. She said, oh, that'd be fantastic. So fast forward, I meet this guy. Now, bear in mind, I've never met him before. So in a room with him, it's just
So this is one-on-one
face.
in person. This is not a Zoom call. This is in person. Okay.
That's correct.
All right.
So I meet this guy. He's very calm. He's not, frenetic, none of that. He's very calm. He looks at me just square in the eye. And in a very calm voice, he says, I just want to let you know that I think, yeah, it gets better. I think what you do has absolutely no value whatsoever. I said, well, okay, that's fair. That's fair. So let's do this. If you agree to take the Harrison assessment, now you at least have to agree to do this. If you can agree to take the Harrison assessment and you spend 1 full hour with me.
In good faith, right? Let's do this in good faith.
That's right. In good faith, you spend 1 full hour debriefing this with me. If after that hour, you still think what I do has no value, I will personally talk to the VP and tell them that you don't have to engage in the coaching program. So he kind of looked at me and he says, all right, I'll do it. So he takes the assessment. After the assessment, he says, well, that actually was pretty clinical. All right, I'll do the coaching. So fast forward 2 months later. Last time I'm talking to him in the formal program.
Right.
I spoke to him after that on a personal level, but in the formal program, last session we have, this guy gets very emotional. And Joe, I got to tell you,
He's not an emotional guy. This guy a guy who's in touch with his emotions, right? I mean,
not at all. Just to give you a picture of the guy before I tell you the rest of the story, like Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. This guy was dogmatic, he was blunt, he was harsh, and he was dominant. So this is what we were dealing with. And very last session, he's getting extremely emotional, tears in his eyes, and he says, I got to tell you, I've always thought of myself as a pretty intelligent person, but I'm going to be honest with you. I never knew how bad my emotional intelligence was. And even on a deeper level than that, and this is when he really is getting emotional, he said, I never knew how negative of an impact that I was having on all of the people around me. He said,
Wow.
this has changed my life in a positive way. And the final note on that story is I interviewed all of the folks in his department that said they were leaving because he was the worst manager ever. Every single one of them stayed. And they said that he'd done a complete 180 from literally the worst manager they'd ever had to one of the best. And
Wow.
and and that is really the power of the Harrison assessment and learning better emotional intelligence. Again, this is that people say at face value, that's soft. No, it's not soft because that had an extraordinary impact on the uh, human level and also on a financial level for that company in a very positive way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what Ryan and I do is we really help leaders not only to find their own potential, but we help leaders to create inspired performance across the board in the organization. And that's just one of many stories.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's an amazing story. I love that story. It's so fascinating to me because I can kind of identify with that person. Shocker, right? As far as being high on the direct and blunt scale. Um, to kind of conclude our discussion about the Harrison assessment here, Michael, I would recommend. And I hope you're okay with this. It's my podcast, so I guess you got to be okay with it. But I would recommend to those executives who are listening or those department heads, to basically say, hey, give Michael and the Mental Hygiene Project a chance and go through that Harrison assessment, go through that hour or 90-minute assessment that you'll do virtually over the different paradoxes. And, like I went through that process. I thought it was really illuminating, and take it in baby steps. See how you feel, see how you jibe with Michael. And if you feel like you got a good vibe and you feel like it makes sense and there's some value there, then go into the next phase of maybe introducing it to your senior executive staff, and then we'll see how that goes. And then I think it's probably going to lead to some really good insights and illuminating insights as far as how you interact with your team and how you can become more functional and effective as a team. And then we can maybe talk about going into this second program that you guys have, the second sort of tier of projects, which are products, which is where you're talking about the mental health, improving the mental health of the entire organization or the department. If you want to go to a department level, what do you got? Is that a fair approach?
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're referring to, Joe, is our foundational program. We call it our foundational program. It's called Psychological Empowerment 360. And it most certainly has a mental health component to it. And yet, really and truly, it's more what Ryan and I would refer to as proactive resilience. Because as I was explaining before, although Ryan and I are not clinicians ourselves, we do work with psychiatrists and psychologists and behavioral scientists. So everything that we have in the program is evidence based and peer reviewed. And we can either do this program live, and to your point, we like to do this organization wide. And we've done this with municipalities, entire cities, fire departments, police departments, on a significant level in the municipality space. And the idea of the program is that it creates a foundation for both individual and organizational resilience. And it can be done live or it can be done online. And online, in particular, it's 18 segments and it's 3 hours in length when you add that all up in
But in
terms of
bite-sized
the
pieces, right? These are
in
bite-sized pieces.
yes,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely, bite-sized pieces. So the actual segments are anywhere from 7 minutes to 14 minutes at the absolute longest. And that's the reason, again, we want bite-sized pieces. We know people are busy. And so when people can sit down and do one segment or two segments at a time, then it really is built in a way where each segment kind of
Built
lays
on each other.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
laying a brick to build on top of the last brick to ultimately, when you get to the end of psychological empowerment, it's improved levels of resilience and it's improved balance. We go through what we call our wheel of wellness, which is essentially 13 different areas that are important to create better satisfaction in life. And the wheel of wellness is kind of interesting. We share this with clients too, by the way. So people can do an individual assessment. And essentially, what they get is a sheet with the Wheel of Wellness on it. And what we encourage them to do, privately away from people, so you can be honest with yourself, is to look at the wheel. And again, there's 13 different areas, and it goes from satisfaction to dissatisfaction. And the idea is you want to mark the wheel on the sheet closer to satisfaction or closer to dissatisfaction for each of the 13 areas. And then I will tell you, Ryan and I have done this with many clients and lots of people in our sessions. We've never seen a person who had a perfect, you know, round kind of assessment of
Right.
themselves in terms of being satisfied in every single area.
Right. Right.
The idea is that when we do a self assessment, we can find out and be honest with ourselves where we are in terms of things like mental health is one area, sleep health, financial health, um, you know, eating habits.
I'm glad you're breaking that out, because I was just going to ask you, Michael. Like, this is a comprehensive, holistic assessment of the individual, right? This is not just focusing on the individual's work balance, work and satisfaction and the morale in the workplace. This is looking at all the issues that we encounter or encompass us as human beings, and how we try to get as much balance as possible on that wheel, so we can become more effective as employees, but also better human beings, better spouses, better parents, better friends, right? That kind of deal.
Absolutely. And I mean, other areas include things like relationships and learning, and the list goes on. And you really nailed it there, Joe, because it's not necessarily just in the workplace. Now, granted, it has tremendous positive effect to be as balanced as possible or as close to satisfaction in those areas in the workplace. But on a personal level, as you said, you know, being a better spouse, being a better father, mother, son, daughter, it really has a tremendous positive impact.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, that's just so important, because in order, in my opinion, to be a great, truly great employee, you have to also have balance and feel good about where your station is in life and all these other areas, right? I mean, yeah, you can be a really, outstanding employee and just be grinding and just sort of living at work and be a workaholic, but eventually you're going to burn out and you're going to crash and burn, and you're going to give up the ghost, right? And I think what's very important for us as leaders is to make sure that we are taking care of the flock, right? Our the flock in the holistic sense, and making sure that our people who work for us, who are giving their blood, sweat, and tears to the organization, that we're also doing our best to give back to them, to make sure to give them the power and the skills and equip them with the ability to be the best human beings they can be. That might sound a little fluffy coming from me, but I'm having a conversion. I'm having a conversion experience this year. You know what I mean? So, but I will say this, Michael. And one of the things I talk about is, like, it's kind of fluffy, and you and I've had conversations about EAPs, these programs to help employees. And can you tell us where you fit into that wheel of, like, EAPs and the value you bring to the organization? I mean, bring it home to us in some sort of brass tack sense.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's a couple of different buckets there. So let's address EAP first. 98% of medium sized to large sized organizations have an employee assistance program. The utilization rate is less than 4%. So I want to make clear Ryan and I are huge advocates of an EAP program. We want to complement what an EAP does. We don't want to replace it. It's not about replacing it, it's
Right,
about
right.
complementing it. And interestingly enough, we have scientifically validated psychological empowerment 360. We actually did a 2-year study of participants, and the results were quite remarkable.
When you say we, you mean you're talking about an assessment of the participants within your program, the Mental Hygiene Project?
We actually had an outside professor, Dr. Shannon Taylor, really head up this scientific validation. And it was a validation of people who have gone through Psychological Empowerment 360. So these are people that have actually experienced the
Okay.
program itself. And what we found was quite remarkable. Many really extraordinary results. And organizationally speaking, for the city managers that are listening, we actually came back that people who go through this program, it can affect organizations by having a 2% increase in what's called psychological capital, which is essentially hope, self efficacy, resilience, and optimism. Now, for people sitting, maybe you're listening to this in your car, wherever you think, it's not really that big of a deal. I mean, come on, yeah,
Right.
2%.
2%. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I was just gonna say that.
Yeah,
2%.
not
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
not a big deal, right?
Yeah. That
Well,
ain't moving the needle, is it?
it 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 is, and here's why. Because a 2% increase in psychological capital for an organization has been shown to improve actual business results in a medium-sized organization by $10 million.
When you say medium-sized organization, give me can you give me a dollar? Like, what's 10 million mean in that context?
Well, you can be looking at an organization for a municipality, for example, any medium-sized municipality, and a $10 million increase, a $10 million impact in terms of efficacy and improvement is really going to have an incredible organizational uptick. And
Right.
also, the just to be clear, the scientific study also said that participants had a significant increase in their attitudes, behaviors, their health, and well being. So
Yeah.
when you put all of that together, it's really a tremendous human and financial impact.
And I assume you would have no issue releasing that study if a executive wants to read it or a department
We
head,
would love
correct?
to send it.
Okay,
We would
awesome.
love to send it. Absolutely. We're happy to send that to any leader that would like to read it. And
Yeah.
it's done very scientifically. Again, you'll be able to, as a leader, look at, if you like statistics, you'll love it because you can go through and you look at all of the areas that it impacts in terms of the stats and what that means.
So when we talk about this psychological empowerment 360, essentially what the organization would do, or a department, but we're going to talk more of the organization here, is that you're going to set up a cost structure on a number of employee basis, right? The cost is going to be based off the number of employees in the organization, and essentially every employee is going to have access to this program. Is that a fair representation of how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. It's what you would call a sliding scale. So, in other words, depending upon the number of people that were in the organization, it's a sliding scale of what the per head cost or investment, if you will. We
Right.
like to say this is an investment because it really is an investment in an organization's future. It's not a cost; it's an investment in an organization's future, in an organization's efficacy and productivity and creativity and inspiration, and all of those things we've been talking about.
Awesome. And I kind of want to bring this home by maybe ending the episode or entering this episode on a couple points. One is, could you briefly explain to the listeners who Ryan Gallik is and what his background is and what kind of brought him into this space? Because I think that's relevant when it comes to the psychological empowerment 360 and mental health for the organization, because he was in public safety. And I think I don't want to steal your thunder, but he went through some traumatic experiences. And then also, can you follow up with that by giving us a quick story about an organization that has gone through that process, maybe with some healthy skepticism, like a Joe Turner, right? And I think there's a story about a police department or whatnot that's gone through that process, and they've had really good results. So maybe you can kind of maybe end this interview with an explanation of who Ryan Gallik is and why it's relevant to my audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you, it's an incredible honor to be able to work with Ryan. Ryan spent nearly 20 years as a firefighter paramedic. And so he understands real life trauma on a level that many people don't.
Right.
And interestingly enough, he experienced a significant amount of trauma at a very young age. At the age of 12, he actually witnessed a school shooting that left his classmate dead.
Wow.
And that was the impetus for Ryan to actually go into a career as a firefighter paramedic. And so Ryan really has worked to overcome his own personal trauma. And then, as you can imagine, almost 20 years as a firefighter paramedic, the traumatic things that you see and the traumatic things that you
Can't
experience,
imagine. I can't
it's
imagine.
it's
Yeah.
it's beyond what I can imagine as well. I have enormous respect for Ryan as well as all of our first responders who go through such trauma. And so for Ryan, being able to experience this traumatic kind of journey and experience what we call post traumatic growth out of
I love
that.
that. I've never heard that phrase, but I love it. Post traumatic growth. That's a great term.
Yeah, and Ryan is really an example of post traumatic growth to the nth degree, you might say, because he really has been on a journey, and that is. One of the reasons that Ryan and I came together, kind of a quick aside, we met through my wife, who is the assistant director of the Valencia College Firegrounds. So she actually works to run the institution at Valencia College that trains future firefighters. And Ryan had been an instructor there. And I remember her coming home one time. She said, "Man, you got to meet this guy named Ryan Gallik. He's great. He's amazing. Tremendous speaker, great instructor, really has a passion for mental health, has a passion for helping people create better balance. I think that the two of you would really work well together. You should at least meet. And if nothing else." And so we met, we talked. I have a different background. I come from the corporate world of creating organizations that are high performing organizations, high performing cultures. And Ryan and I, again, we met, we talked a little more, and that was kind of the impetus for the Mental Hygiene Project, because our different but also shared backgrounds have come together to create an outstanding value for our clients. And that really has been something that a lot of people make note of. And you mentioned a story that I'll share with you to kind of end off here. Uh, People, understandably so, can be skeptical about
Of
things,
course,
when you
yes,
say
yes.
psychological
Especially
empowerment.
especially in
And
this day and age of 2025, where we got AI and everything else.
of
Everything, man, it's
course,
crazy. Yeah,
and we get that. And probably the among the most skeptical folks would be those from the first responder community,
100%. Right, 100%.
and and again with good reason. So it was interesting because we worked with one of our police department clients, and after all of the sworn officers in this particular department had gone through psychological empowerment, as well as their civilian population, the chief of police called Ryan and I, and he said, "Guys, I got to tell you, I'm going to be real honest with you. It is no small task to get a law enforcement officer to watch some kind of a purported training program."
Right,
He
right.
said it's just very difficult to get people to do that. He said, "However, I will tell you this: everybody went through your program, and I had people calling me from the field saying this was the best, most practical program that they've ever gone through, because they really got things that they could use to improve their resilience. It meant something. It was engaging. It wasn't boring." And he said the positive feedback I got was something that I have never heard from my team in general, within the department. And so we really were humbled by that. And
Amazing.
we're very humbled by that response. And we get that a lot from clients in terms of, hey, maybe there's a little bit of skepticism going in, and we welcome that, by the way. And yet, when you look at scientifically validated, peer reviewed, award winning programs, uh, we have that, and that's what we offer clients.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I love that. And coming back to again to this question, would you feel comfortable sharing that reference to individuals who reached out to you to want to get more information about your program?
100%.
Awesome,
100%.
awesome,
Absolutely.
awesome.
If there's anybody listening to this program that would like us to send over the scientific validation, we're happy to do that. Testimonials, references, referrals, we're happy to share all of that.
Yeah, Michael. I mean, I just really think it's really important that we take care of our staff, and the trauma we talked about with Ryan. He went through his trauma in his profession with the public safety component. I think another often overlooked employee group that we really need to be thinking more about are 911 dispatchers. I think that, when we think about public safety, we often talk about the police officers and the firefighters, and deservedly so. But those 911 operators go through such horrific phone calls that they have trauma that they got to deal with too. And I really think we could, put them to the fold or whatnot. So if you're a city manager or department head and you're thinking about giving the Mental Hygiene Project a call, I would encourage you to reach out. We do have a special promotional offer for those who are listening to the podcast. So if you want to save 20%, go to mentalhygieneproject.com/CMU. That's mentalhygieneproject.com/CMU. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. And we'll also get you in touch with Michael so you can reach out if you want to contact him for any sort of studies or research that you want to use for making your decision. Michael, do you have any final parting words or comments for our listeners today?
Thanks so much, Joe. I really appreciate the time. And of course, it's been a 2-year odyssey. So it's just awesome to be able to get this chance to talk. One of the things that Ryan and I pride ourselves on is creating partnerships with organizations. We don't want to just come in, do one program, and then leave. We want to be partners in success with organizations. And we want to help that organization achieve their 3-year plan, their 5-year plan, and beyond. And with what we do, we really create a foundation for growth and development and continued effectiveness, not just from a leadership perspective, but also from an individual perspective that affects the organization in a positive way.
Absolutely. And I will say this too, and be very candid. These guys, Michael Stahl, Ryan Gallik, they've never been pushy. They've never, been doing the hard sell on me. They've been the greatest guys to work with. It's been a 2-year journey, and a lot of it's been because of my own skepticism and my own sort of the push off. But I will let you guys know that these guys are not the hard sell. They're not the sleazy used car salesman. They're just 2 good dudes that are trying to make a difference. And I'm glad we're able to finally complete this and get this interview done, Michael. I know it's been a journey. Shout out to your buddy, your partner, Ryan Gallik, who couldn't be on the show today. But you guys are 2 good dudes, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from those in my space, my world of public sector executive management, what kind of experience they have with your guys' project as time moves on. So thank you again for being on the program.
Thank you, Joe. It's absolutely a pleasure.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for us today. If you are looking at improving the overall mental health quality of your employees and you want to improve the overall organizational performance by attacking all the issues that they're facing, all the traumas that they're facing in and out of the workplace, just with day-to-day life, if you're trying to create those improvements from an organizational effectiveness capabilities, and you want to tackle the leadership and your senior leadership team, and you make sure that the mental health in conjunction with the overall leadership is working in balance, you need to reach out to the Mental Hygiene Project with Michael Stahl and Ryan Gallik. They're great guys, and I think you're going to enjoy the results. I'm Joe Turner. This is the City Manager Unfiltered Podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. If you like the content, please hit that follow, subscribe button. Please leave a rating and review on your platform of choice. Catch you next week.